Hey there, Griff Hamlin here from Blues Guitar Unleashed. Welcome. Thanks for joining me today in a tone quest video, I guess. We're going to kind of chase after the Stevie Ray Vaughan tone without actually chasing after the Stevie Ray Vaughan tone. So here's the thing. And of course, many, I'll say professional players and of course amateur players, you know, if you're playing at home, you'd probably love to be able to get a reasonably good approximation of a Stevie Ray Vaughan type of tone to play Stevie Ray Vaughan type songs. What I don't want to do is go down this huge rabbit hole, right? There are people that have entire websites, there are entire forums, entire Facebook groups, entire enormous amounts of people chasing after, okay, he used this cable and this kind of string, and you know, you gotta have this $150,000 amplifier, you know, the Dumble Steel String Singer, and all this kind of stuff. Okay, well, this is not your video. If you are that person and you really want to go down the rabbit hole and chase Stevie Ray Vaughan's sound, move on. This is absolutely not your video. I love Stevie Ray Vaughan's tone, have always loved Stevie Ray Vaughan's tone, but I also love a lot of other tones and use a lot of different types of tones. And so a lot of times when I'm doing a gig, okay, yeah, maybe I'm going to play some Stevie Ray Vaughan and I need to be able to get an approximation of that tone, but I'm also going to play some B.B. King, and I'm also going to play some Freddie King, and I'm also going to play some Albert King. So I'm going to have a pretty wide variety. I'm going to have different guitars on. I'm going to have different amps. Like a lot of different things can possibly go on. So I actually have gotten, I'll say, a close approximation of a Stevie Ray Vaughan tone 4 different ways. Meaning I'm using a modeler. Okay, I'm using a digital modeler, and I'm using what I believe are models that are very common to most digital platforms, also very common in the real world. So the first one, I played a Fender Twin. Okay, it's a Fender Twin cranked up with nothing else. That's it. Like, it's Fender Twin. It's pretty basic. Almost every modeler or every type of, you know, device on the planet has some sort of blackface Fender emulation. Second one I did was a Marshall Plexi type of emulation. Okay, again, most modelers or whatever have some sort of British or Plexi or Brown or whatever they want to call it kind of emulation. So I sort of did it there too. Then what I did is a Tweed version. Okay, so what I did is I brought up the Bassman, 410 Bassman patch again on my 11 rack, kind of tweaked it a little bit, and got a close approximation with that. Now, is any of them perfect? No. But would any of them do the job? Absolutely. If I had to play Pride and Joy on a set, no sweat. So what I really want to point out is I'm going to go through just really quickly some of the settings and some of the things that I'm using here. It's nothing fancy. It's stuff that you can probably cop. And then at the end, I used my same old basic clean patch, which is a super reverb through a vibroverb cabinet. For whatever reason, I used a different cab. I don't even remember switching that however many years ago I did it. And it's totally clean. And I turned on my little Blues Driver pedal, and I'm going to show you all of that. Now, in addition, I do have a tube screamer. Okay, so I'm gonna set my tube screamer Stevie style. I'm gonna talk about this as well, which is basically, so the level you can see is kind of at about 3 o'clock. Hopefully you can see that. I got the overdrive only at about 9 o'clock or 9:30, not very much. It's pushing a little bit of volume, adding just a skosh of overdrive. The tone knob is just a little bit past noon. And really what the tube screamer does, and this is kind of a recurring theme with the Stevie Ray Vaughan tone and other types of tones like that, is it cuts bass. It gets rid of low end. Low end has a tendency to get muddy. So I have that here on my pedal board. I also have a blues driver, which I do not have to show you. I don't have a camera angle, all that. But when I get to the blues driver segment, I will show you my settings on that. So let's start with the basics, the Fender Twin. Okay, so there's a few things I can demonstrate here kind of right off the bat. And one is, you'll notice that the volume is on 10. Okay, and the bright switch is on. Now the bright switch probably doesn't do a whole lot at 10, to be perfectly honest, because as you hit the bright switches on amps have less and less and less impact as the mids go up and as the volume goes up, but that's okay, whatever. Notice that it is probably not what you would call clean, but in a band context, it comes across as clean. This is one of those situations, and this is one of the things to listen for. You do need to have what we commonly call sort of on the edge of breakup or slightly broken up sound, which in this case, I have. If I back off the volume on my guitar, it gets much cleaner. Or if I simply strum lightly, it sounds very clean and glassy. I can get a really nice sound out of it that way. And if I crank up my volume and really I haven't changed the volume at all, I'm just gonna hit it harder, I can still do that. And because of the little bit of clipping and the little bit of overdrive, when I hit it hard like that, it compresses it. It makes it so it doesn't jump out really hard at you. It's actually a lot more pleasant to listen to that way. So you'll notice that I have the volume at 10. I have the treble fairly high as well, 6-ish, and same with the mids. But notice that the bass is way down at 2. And this, again, is another one of those really important things. Now, you don't have to necessarily know this, but Fender amps, the tone stack is before most of the overdrive is created. Overdrive with a lot of low end in the signal doesn't sound very good. It tends to get farty, for lack of a better word. It just sort of goes, doesn't really do anything. But those nice highs, those respond very well to overdrive. So again, I have a nice sound. Now I should mention the important thing here. I will say that a Stratocaster will do a much better job of this than a humbucking guitar. Okay, so obviously I'm using a Stratocaster. I do have it tuned down a half step. Do I think that's important for getting the Stevie Ray Vaughan sound? No, I don't. To be perfectly honest, I have it tuned this way because I'm going to do a different Stevie Ray Vaughan lesson and it's going to be tuned down a half step for that. So I just left it there. Truth be told, I don't think it's all that important. It doesn't make that much of a difference, but it happens to be that way. So I am tuned down a half step. So it's E flat, A flat, D flat, G flat, B flat, E flat. I will say that when you play that low E and it's really an E flat, it's kind of cool. I do like that. So I won't lie. But do I think it's absolutely necessary? No. However, trying to do this with a humbucker-equipped guitar is very challenging to get the sound because there's simply a lot more high-end and a lot less output from a single coil pickup compared to a humbucking pickup. So the source of the tone is a whole lot different. And, you know, back in the old days, when people wanted different sounds, they grabbed a different guitar. These days, we have a tendency to grab different pedals and different amps and all that kind of stuff. Back in the days when those were not so plentiful, people just grabbed a different guitar because different guitars really do sound a lot different. So you might be able to get away with the Telecaster on this. At least you'd have the single coil pickup. But the Stratocaster, obviously, that's really where it's at for this type of tone. So if you don't have a Stratocaster, if all you have is, say, a Les Paul or a 335 or a PRS or something with two humbuckers, if none of them will split, you're definitely starting behind the 8-ball. If you can split the coil, that might start to get you a little bit of the way there. It might brighten it up a little bit and start to get rid of some of that low end, which again, you're going to hear time and time again, we're getting rid of low end. So you'll notice that if I turn on the tube screamer, now I've really taken a lot more of the low end out. I've increased the output because of having the level so high. Like I said, it's about 3 o'clock, and you might even go up higher than that. But notice that the overall sound didn't get all that much louder, right? Now, I could keep that tube screamer on all the time, and I could back off on my volume, and I could get it to clean up. But I'd prefer to keep a little bit more output without the tube screamer. I think it's a little bit fuller sounding. Obviously, it's kind of up to you. But kicking it on for leads, and you hear Stevie Ray Vaughan do that a lot. You hear him play the rhythm parts. A song like Tightrope or Couldn't Stand the Weather or something like that, you can hear that it's rolled off, and you can hear that tube screamer kick on for the lead. That's common. That's something that we do all the time. So don't feel like that's weird. You don't have to leave everything on all the time or leave everything off all the time. It's totally normal and totally natural to kick that in whenever you want. And again, the tube screamer is a huge part of Stevie Ray Vaughan's sound because of this bass cutting that it does. It really pushes those mid-range frequencies, which allows the guitar to be heard over a loud band. And that's a really cool thing. All right, let's take a look at one more thing, I guess, that I want to mention, though, about the Twin here. Like I said, I have this is effectively a Twin reverb with a 2x12 black duo speaker cabinet. Again, that's what you would expect with a Fender Twin reverb. I'm using if you happen to look down and see the microphone type, it says Condenser 67. Sometimes you'll see like 57s and 4.9s, all these different kinds of microphones. Back in the old days, condenser microphones worked great. I still love condenser microphones today because I think they do a really nice job of accurately capturing exactly what you hear. A lot of modern microphones have very sort of specific purposes, like the SM57, while it's kind of a studio workhorse, it's really not a very accurate representation of what comes out of a guitar amp. It happens to work really well in recording sessions. It sort of gets rid of some of the troublesome frequencies and emphasizes some useful frequencies. But again, that's for mixing in a band setting. Doesn't work as well for our purposes. So the Condenser 67 does a really good job of making it so that what you and I are hearing is pretty close to what would really be coming out of the amp. Let's look at, I'll say, my Marshall Plexi version of this sound. Okay, so again, you'll notice we sort of have a brighter sound. And you'll notice that I have the bass down. It's at 3, right? I have the normal volume lower than the high gain volume. Now, old Plexis, old Marshalls like this guy right here that have 4 inputs. It was a common thing back in the day to jump from one side to the other. You have the normal side, which is very dark, not many treble frequencies. And you have the high side or the treble side, which has a lot of high frequencies in it. So by combining them, you get a little bit of both. Now, some amp modelers or some amps that you may have that, some may not. At the end of the day, what again we want to do is we want to have not so much bass, enough that it sounds reasonably full, but we again want to emphasize those mids and those treble frequencies. Now, a Marshall style amplifier in general has a lot more mids in it by nature, so I keep the mids lower. I've got that high gain. They call it high gain. Really, it's more the treble, and it sounds like high gain because, again, those treble frequencies really react well to being overdriven as compared to the low end frequencies. So as I play this, even with the volume all the way up, if I don't hit it very hard, it's It's got that chimey, clean kind of sound. But if I hit it hard, right? And Stevie Ray Vaughan was known to use Marshalls in his career. He used plenty of them. The Marshall Major in particular, which was a like 200 watt version of a Marshall Plexi. And of course, if I add the tube screamer, again, it cuts more of that bass. Stevie Ray Vaughan would never play that, I get it. But I would, right? So again, we've sort of got an approximation, okay? This may not be exact. It doesn't have to be. Truth be told, this does have just a little bit more gain than I might normally expect with this kind of sound, those highs. It's close. For dialing it up quick and dirty, it's real close, okay? Again, I'm using the Condenser 67 microphone. In this case, we have a 412 with greenbacks for the speaker type, but that's what goes with the Marshall. So again, that makes sense. So notice that really on this one, it's just about having a little bit less of the mids because Marshall style amps or British style amps have a lot more mids involved. Now, if you have like a Vox AC30 type of thing, a lot of times those don't even have a mid-range control. So that can be challenging. You might have to go so far as to use an EQ to get rid of some of the mids. But most modelers or you know, modern versions of these styles of amps do have bass, mid, and treble, so they give you those options available. Let's take a look at a Tweed version of this. What you might notice about this one is that it's actually not that much different than the Marshall, even though it's a Fender. We've still got the bass pretty far out. I've got the mids a little bit lower. I've got the treble a little bit lower, but again, we have that bright volume and normal volume. So I'm kind of approaching it very much the same way as I did with the Plexi. So I get those nice chimey highs. And if I switch over, what I want is for that to kind of bounce back. I'll show you what will happen if I crank up that bass, right? It will kind of just do nothing. It's a little hard to hear it when I do that. But you can hear now that I've cranked the low end and not the high end. Kind of just goes, it may be hard for you to hear over a video, but you can absolutely feel it. It doesn't snap. It doesn't give you that bounce. So we'll just put this back over here and so again, if I hit it hard, if I don't, if I want to add the tube screamer, I get that same kind of thing, right? Again, the tube screamer takes more of those lows out, tightens everything up, gives me that little bit of extra gain. But notice that all three of these amps have taken to the tube screamer basically the same way. That's exactly what you want. You want them to kind of soak it up a little bit because they have just a little bit of drive on them. but at the same time, you want them to, not have too much mid-range already built in, so that adding the tube screamer makes it super mid-range heavy. You want the tube screamer and the amp itself to kind of balance out. So that's why I've scooped out the mids on the Tweed and the Marshall sounding one, because those tend to be mid-forward amps. They have a lot of mid-range in them already, as opposed to the Twin Reverb, which has a lot less mid-range in it naturally. Okay, let's take a look at one other sound. So this one is, I'll say, my same old, same old. This is the exact same patch that I have recorded every lesson for about the last decade or so. And as you can see, it is it's a super reverb style with a 112 cabinet. Again, I don't ever remember changing the cabinet, but apparently I did at one point. The volume is let me turn the tube screamer off. Sorry. You can hear it's very quiet, actually. It's very clean. And the treble is a little bit high, but the bright switch is not on. And the mids are at 5, and the bass is at about 6. So it is what you might consider a very round type of tone. And what I'm doing is I'm gonna hit it with a blues driver, okay, with my good old blues driver. So here's my good old blues driver. The level is at about 10 o'clock. I'll say on a clock dial in case you can't see that. It's kind of floating in that direction. And the gain is about the same. And the tone is, about 1 o'clock, 1:30, right? And so this is just, as you can hear now, I'm going to turn up the level just a little bit. So again, it's just that very little bit of overdrive. So it's kind of like now I'm playing into a slightly overdriven amp. And again, if I hit it quietly, and if I hit it hard, I get that bounce, I get that little bit of bite back out of it. And I can again turn on my tube screamer. So now it's guitar, tube screamer, blues driver, very clean amp. And again, I get that same sort of reaction. So are any of these tones exact duplicates of Stevie Ray Vaughan's tone? No. On the other hand, they're all approximations. Like I would go out and play a gig, play a couple of Stevie Ray Vaughan songs with any of these tones and be perfectly happy. And that's kind of the whole point, is if you're trying to get it just to play 1 or 2 songs, you just got to get close. Maybe turn a couple knobs on one of your amps or your pedals, and you're there. I just wanted to make it a way that you can get there kind of on the quick and dirty, and that takes care of business for you. Even Stevie Ray Vaughan himself played, a variety of amps throughout his life and throughout his recording career. I think I heard somewhere that they had like 13 different amps mic'd up for like the Couldn't Stand the Weather album or something like that. It was an enormous amount of amps. So even if you asked him, he wouldn't be able to tell you exactly which amps are being played at any one time. So the main point is, getting rid of that low end, getting it to the point where at least the sound is still full, but there's not that much bottom to muddy up the works. You want that nice present top end so that when you play quietly, you get that nice glass to it. And you have the tube screamer for when the solos come so that you can push it out above the band, get that mid-range push, get that little bit of extra drive, that little bit of extra sustain, and everything works out. So I hope this has been reasonably helpful for you, and as always, if you have guitar playing friends that you think could get something out of this video, I hope you will share it with them. And I'm Griff Hamlin from Blues Guitar Unleashed. I will talk to you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.